When The Mask hit theaters in 1994, it transformed Jim Carrey into a household name and cemented itself as one of the most successful comic book movies of the decade. With a worldwide box office gross of $352 million and a gleaming 81% Rotten Tomatoes score, this supernatural comedy became an instant classic, an explosion of rubber-faced humor, cartoonish chaos, and larger-than-life energy. But what many casual fans never realized is that The Mask began life as something far darker, bloodier, and more twisted. In an era where audiences crave reinvention and grittier storytelling, perhaps it's time for The Mask to return, not as a slapstick comedy, but as the horror-tinged, psychological nightmare it was always meant to be. The Mask, the movie that defined Jim Carrey's wild genius. 1994 was a landmark year for Jim Carrey. In a single 12-month stretch, he unleashed Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, Dumb and Dumber, and The Mask, three films that showcased his unparalleled physical comedy and anarchic charm. As Stanley Ipkiss, the meek banker who transforms into a green-faced, hyperactive trickster, Carrey delivered a masterclass in comedic timing and kinetic energy. The movie's magic lay in its duality. Carrey balanced the soft-spoken, lonely dreamer of Ipkiss with the unstoppable cartoon chaos of The Mask, embodying a Looney Tunes spirit brought to life. Alongside him, a then-unknown Cameron Diaz dazzled in her film debut, oozing charisma and promise. Together, they made The Mask one of the most memorable comic book adaptations of its time, albeit one that couldn't be further from its source material. The Mask's comic book origins were brutal and bloody. The comic that inspired The Mask, originally published by Dark Horse Comics between 1989 and 1991, was anything but lighthearted. Created by Mike Richardson and developed by Doug Mahnke and John Arcudi, the original story followed Stanley Ipkiss as he spiraled into madness after discovering the mystical mask. Instead of using his newfound powers for comedic hijinks, the comic book version of Ipkiss became a violent vigilante-turned-serial killer. Known as Big Head, his reign of terror left behind piles of corpses and gallons of blood, as the mask twisted its wearer into a monstrous embodiment of chaos and rage. Later storylines expanded the mythology, showing how others who wore the mask succumbed to the same homicidal impulses, blending supernatural horror with pitch-black humor. In short, the real Mask was less Bugs Bunny and more Freddy Krueger with a sense of irony. Even the 1994 film hinted at its dark core. While Chuck Russell's film adaptation leaned heavily into slapstick comedy, it didn't completely abandon its horror roots. Beneath the film's goofy exterior, moments of genuine menace lingered. Take the scene where Stanley turns the tables on the crooked mechanics. What plays as slapstick revenge in the movie was a full-on murder spree in the comics. Similarly, Peter Green's portrayal of the gangster Dorian Tyrell brings an eerie realism to the film's otherwise absurd tone. His transformation into a monstrous, power-hungry villain feels almost like a glimpse into the darker world that the film refused to explore fully. That balance, humor clashing with horror, is what makes The Mask so fascinating. It's a movie that constantly flirts with darkness, but never quite crosses the line. Why The Mask's reboot should go dark. With the rise of mature comic book reinterpretations like Joker and Logan, the time is ripe for The Mask to return in a tone closer to its original source. Imagine a modern retelling that treats the mask as a cursed object, something that amplifies the wearer's repressed desires, fears, and violent tendencies. A reboot could blend the psychological horror of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with the surreal chaos of The Boys. Stanley Ipkiss could start as a sympathetic figure, an everyman crushed by societal pressures, before descending into mania as the mask takes control. Casting someone like Ryan Reynolds could be a bold move. His natural comedic instincts would make the character's darker transformation all the more disturbing. A series format, following different people corrupted by the mask's power, as in the comics, could further explore the artifact's legacy across time. Son of the Mask proved why a darker take is needed. Unfortunately, the 2005 sequel Son of the Mask proved how disastrously wrong a lighthearted continuation could go. Starring Jamie Kennedy, The movie replaced the sharp wit and chaotic energy of the original with garish CGI and family-friendly nonsense. It bombed both critically and commercially, earning a spot on countless worst sequels ever made lists. A darker reboot could right that wrong by reclaiming The Mask as a bold, horror-driven cautionary tale about the corruption of power and identity. Conclusion: the time is now to unmask the darkness. The Mask remains one of the strangest success stories in film history, a goofy, neon-tinted comedy born from a comic drenched in ultraviolence. But in an age when comic book adaptations are exploring mature, psychological territory, The Mask is ripe for reinvention. By embracing its horror roots, a modern reboot could transform a once goofy antihero into a chilling reflection of human madness and prove that some smiles hide something truly monstrous underneath.